This week on Jerusalem Dateline, the move of the embassy of the United States to Jerusalem. Plus, Israel hits back at Iran's military buildup inside Syria. Is it the prelude to a wider Mideast war? And Scott Ross takes to the streets to take the pulse of Israelis and hear what they're saying about the move of the U.S. Embassy. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. The United States said Israel had the right to defend itself after Iranian forces inside Syria launched rocket attacks against Israel's Golan Heights. Israel struck back and decimated multiple Iranian military installations in Syria. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Iran crossed the red line and will not tolerate Iran's military buildup on its northern border. The Iranian Quds Force based in Syria launched 20 rockets at Israel's Golan Heights.
A blatant attack on Israeli sovereignty. They sent 20 rockets from an Iranian vehicle, a multi-barrel vehicle, which were targeting the IDF positions that you can see here, the first line of IDF positions on the Golan Heights. 20 rockets were fired. 4 of them were on a trajectory to hit IDF positions. They were intercepted by the Iron Dome system, and the rest fell short inside Syrian territory.
In response, the IDF said Israeli fighter jets carried out dozens of airstrikes against Iranian military targets inside Syria.
We have made it very clear that we are here to defend ourselves. Those who started this round of violence were the Iranians who attacked Israel. We responded accordingly, and we are now waiting to see how the Iranians will respond.
The IDF released this video clip showing the Iranian multi-barrel rocket launcher. Here it's leaving a military base and eventually bombed by Israel and partially captured on this camera in the nose of the bomb. Video from Syria reportedly showed the interception of Israeli bombs. Syrian media reported more than 20 killed. Iranian expert Ronen Bergman says Israel's intelligence services have one main concern.
They would tell you without hesitation, our main concern is the Iranian deployment in Syria. This is what we are concerned of, because Iran is trying to build for itself and for Hezbollah a second front.
After the attack, schools were opened and life returned to normal on Israel's Golan Heights. Despite the timing of the incident, analysts say it's a separate issue from President Trump's withdrawal from the nuclear deal, and Israel is ready to prevent Iran from taking root inside Syria. Some said it was a bad week for Iran. Earlier, U.S. President Trump announced that the United States would pull out of the Iranian nuclear deal. In response to that decision, Iranian lawmakers chanted "Death to America" in their parliament and set fire to a paper American flag. President Trump made the decision in the face of strong international pressure, but he said the nuclear deal only made it easier for Iran to make a nuclear weapon. CBN White House correspondent Ben Kennedy reports.
President Trump's move to back out of the Iran deal has many wondering what's next. To top that, this move comes as the president prepares for another nuclear deal, this time with North Korea.
I am announcing today that the United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal.
An announcement that made headlines worldwide. President Trump reinstating sanctions on Iran and even imposing secondary sanctions on nations that engage with Iran.
Any nation that helps Iran in its quest for nuclear weapons could also be strongly sanctioned by the United States.
The accord was designed to freeze Iran's nuclear program in exchange for an end to economic sanctions on Tehran. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accused the Iranians of secretly developing nuclear weapons.
The deal didn't push war further away. It actually brought it closer. The deal didn't reduce Iran's aggression. It dramatically increased it.
Netanyahu called Trump's move to back out of the deal historic. President Obama, on the other hand, says it's a serious mistake. Some feel that by getting rid of the deal, Iran can start its nuclear production at a higher level. Iran's president warned Tuesday that his country may resume enriching uranium if European leaders failed to preserve Iran's benefits from the 2015 accord.
They may not, just because they're also appealing for European support, and certainly I don't think they would start a nuclear weapons program soon. But it's risky getting rid of the entire deal.
We are now respected. We are feared, and quite frankly, a lot of folks love us across this globe as well because of actions just like this. He's calling out bad actors for what they are, being bad actors, and he's standing against evil.
Now, this move to back out of the deal faces opposition from European allies and could potentially deepen the president's isolation on the world stage. France's President Emmanuel Macron tweeted that France, Britain, and Germany regret the U.S. decision. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, Washington.
Another major decision that President Trump made is the plan to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. The move takes place on May 14th, 70 years to the day after Israel became a nation. And preparations have been underway for weeks, beautifying the city and stepping up security to prepare for what many consider history in the making. The White House has released the official delegation for the opening of the U.S. Embassy here. While President Trump will not be attending, son-in-law Jared Kushner, daughter Ivanka, and others will represent the United States for the official opening on May 14th to coincide with Israel's 70th anniversary. Here in Jerusalem, city and State Department officials are getting ready for the move of the embassy just days away. The Israeli and American banners you see behind me as you approach the consulate are just some of the big changes taking place. Workers are taking down consulate signs and installing new ones pointing to the soon-to-be U.S. Embassy. Even Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat came to have his picture taken with the new signs. Workers are planting new trees and landscaping the road leading up to the embassy. On the other side, heavy equipment is constructing a new access road to the embassy. The consulate is located in the neighborhood of Arnona, where, according to National Police spokesman Mickey Rosenfeld, security would become a much greater priority.
In terms of security and the level of security, it will be of its highest in the same way as it was also in the area of Tel Aviv on the beachfront there. Security in Jerusalem is more sensitive, taking into consideration also the nearby neighborhoods that can be problematic in certain periods throughout the year. But we're coordinating closely together with American security, border police units that are on the ground as well that are protecting this specific area, this neighborhood and this site. And we won't take any chances whatsoever in the next coming period.
For security reasons, we can't show all the changes going on around the consulate, but the new seal of the embassy is being prepared for next week's ceremony. Whatever changes, Rosenfeld says the embassy move is significant on a number of levels.
Tremendously important, tremendously significant, both on a government, political level as well as a security level. It's a move that should have taken place many years ago. The Israeli police will protect the area, will protect the neighborhoods. Jerusalem is calm and quiet, and we're continuing to make sure that it stays that way.
Up next, a look at why many feel the move of the U.S. Embassy will be a blessing for America. President Trump's daughter Ivanka and son-in-law Jared Kushner are among those attending the U.S. Embassy move celebration. President Trump is being hailed as courageous for implementing a 23-year-old law mandating the move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And as we'll see, the move represents a significant turning point for the city and the Jewish people. All of this excitement comes 70 years to the day after President Harry Truman became the first world leader to recognize the State of Israel.
I think America is coming in alignment with biblical truth.
The Bible mentions Jerusalem and Zion almost 1,000 times. It's also been the capital of the Jewish people for 3,000 years.
This has been a theme that's in our spiritual DNA. And therefore, when the President of the United States moves the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem and recognizes Jerusalem as Israel's capital, he is addressing something at the core of Jewish identity.
Behind me is the home of the new U.S. Embassy. President Trump is making history as he moves the embassy from Tel Aviv here to Jerusalem. That history started thousands of years ago when King David captured Jerusalem and made it his capital. 400 years later, the Jewish people are expelled for 70 years to Babylon, then returned to rebuild the Second Temple with the help of Persia's King Cyrus. Former Israeli ambassador to the United Nations Dory Gold says Trump's embassy move might even compare to that biblical king.
That was a huge charitable act on his part, which is in our historical memory. And the fact that now President Trump is going to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem puts him in a special category, and perhaps even the category of the ancient King Cyrus of Persia.
Fast forward to 1967 and the Six-Day War, when Israel reunites Jerusalem under its sovereignty. Then in 1980, Israel officially makes Jerusalem its capital, and countries worldwide move their embassies from the city in protest.
The Christian embassy was founded after 13 national embassies left Jerusalem, and it provided a unique moment where the Jewish people were willing to accept our hand of friendship.
David Parsons is with the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem. As a lawyer, he helped draft the Jerusalem Embassy Act, passed by Congress in 1995, mandating the embassy move to Jerusalem.
And now, 22 years later, after all these delays and waivers, it is back to our order. Trump has recognized Jerusalem. The ambassador is going to be working here, and then they're going to start building the building. So it's sort of a moment of personal vindication for me.
Tony Perkins and Michelle Bachmann are on President Trump's Evangelical Advisory Council. They said the move will be good for the U.S., other nations, and Mideast peace.
The scripture is pretty clear on that, and that those who bless Israel will be blessed.
Israel's enemies have always fought on the propaganda argument of words, the fact that Israel was illegitimate and had no right to this land. President Trump, excuse the pun, played a Trump card. He's taken that argument off the table. He said, look, we aren't going to even talk about this anymore, that Jerusalem is or isn't Israel's. It is. We're making a decision. It is.
President Trump's decision effectively recognizes the western part of the city as Israel's capital. Most holy sites are in the eastern part. Gold says only in a united Jerusalem under Israeli sovereignty would those sites be protected.
Jerusalem's been the capital of the Jewish people for 3,000 years. I don't see that changing. I think as long as we have freedom of worship, freedom of access guaranteed, I think that many in the Arab world will acquiesce to the idea that Jerusalem remains the undivided capital of Israel.
Coming up, hear what Israel's ambassador to the U.S. has to say about the significance of the U.S. Embassy move to his capital. Ron Dermer is Israel's ambassador to the U.S. He sat down with CBN's Ben Kennedy, who asked him about what the U.S. Embassy move to Jerusalem means to Israel.
What does this mean for Israel and the Jewish people to have the U.S. Embassy opening up in Jerusalem in a little more than 2 weeks?
It's a historic day. President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital is a decision that will be remembered for generations and generations to come. You know, the Jewish people remember Cyrus, the decision of the ancient Persian king to enable the Jews, allow the Jews to go back and rebuild the Second Temple in Jerusalem. We remember Cyrus. I don't know if the Persians remember Cyrus, but the Jewish people remember Cyrus. So we're going to remember this decision by President Trump for a long time to come. And the next stage in that decision of recognizing Jerusalem as our capital is a decision to move your embassy to Jerusalem. And I have to tell you, after President Trump boldly made that decision and had the guts to do something that his predecessors did not do, many of them promised it, but there were 12 presidents before President Trump that were around since Israel made Jerusalem our capital in 1949, who did not move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, and only President Trump did it. Since he made that decision and showed that type of leadership, you've seen now other countries following. Guatemala has already announced that it's going to move, and I can tell you that there's at least a half a dozen countries that in the next few days could actually make the decision to move their embassies to Jerusalem and follow his lead. It's great for Israel, and I also think it's great for peace.
Ambassador Dermer is talking about peace. Could you also give us a sense of the reaction from the Palestinian Authority to this recent moving the embassy to Jerusalem?
I think the more interesting question is what the reaction was in the Arab world. The reaction was almost nothing. It was the Sherlock Holmes story of the Hound of the Baskervilles, you know, the dog that didn't bark. I think that many governments in the Arab world, the governments, not yet the peoples, but governments in the Arab world want to actually end the conflict with Israel. Jerusalem is the most sensitive issue. Of all the issues that Israel and the Palestinians deal with, Jerusalem has always been the most, and seen, rightly so, as the most sensitive. And the Arab world, while they did not support this decision, and while they issued statements opposing it, you didn't see an extremely negative reaction throughout the Arab world. Of course, the Palestinians negatively reacted, but they react negatively to anything. If we were waiting for the Palestinians to agree to something, we never would have founded the state, and Israel wouldn't have existed for a single day. The important thing is that President Trump, in making this decision, pushed back against all the lies that the Palestinians tell their people and their children, that the Jews have no history in Jerusalem and no connection to Jerusalem. And the only peace that you can make, a genuine peace, has to be based on truth. And Jerusalem as Israel's capital, that is a peace based on truth.
Why is Jerusalem so important to the Jewish people?
Well, there is no people who has a greater connection to a city than the Jewish people's connection to Jerusalem. And to think that there was no leader around the world that actually could make the decision to put their embassy in Jerusalem is an outrage that had gone on for 70 years. And we are so grateful to President Trump for finally being the first leader in the world to recognize Jerusalem as our capital. As I said, this will echo throughout the history of the Jewish people. And we're a very old people with a very long memory. And we are going to remember what President Trump did for generations and generations to come.
And Ambassador Dermer, how do you envision the final status of the city?
Jerusalem should remain the united capital of the state of Israel. And only under Israel's sovereignty, has Jerusalem been a capital that protects the religious sites of all faiths. You see what's happening in the Middle East. You see what's happening to Christian communities throughout the Middle East. You have ancient Christian communities that have been decimated. You have Christians who have been decapitated in mass. You see religious sites, churches that have been blown up and destroyed. The most sensitive place on the planet is probably that 1 square kilometer in the old city of Jerusalem, where you have the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, you have the Western Wall and the Temple Mount, you have the Al-Aqsa and other religious sites that are on the Temple Mount. Only under Israel's control will we be sure that the religious freedom of all will be protected. If we were not there, if we actually ceded that ground to the Palestinians, you can bet that what happened in Iraq and Syria and elsewhere through the Middle East where Christian sites were destroyed would happen there as well. Israel preserves the religious freedom of all. We take that responsibility very seriously, and Jerusalem should remain united as Israel's capital in any future peace agreement.
Up next, CBN's Scott Ross takes to the streets of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem to hear what Israelis are saying about the U.S. Embassy move. Israeli government officials are praising President Trump for moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. But what are the Israeli people saying? CBN's Scott Ross took to the streets of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem to ask them what they think.
How do you feel about the embassy being moved to Jerusalem?
It's always been, the capital of the Jewish people. Me as a person, I don't think it causes much difference except of world acceptance that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel.
How do you feel about the embassy being moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem?
It should be with 20 years ago.
Yeah. As Nikki Haley said, Israel did not need the United States to tell us what the capital of Israel is.
That's
Jerusalem has been the capital of Israel for 3,000 years.
I think it's going to be a lot of mess.
A mess?
Yeah.
Why?
Because it was a status quo Until now, everything was okay. It will make a lot of fuss, noise, and hatred.
Fuss, noise, and hatred.
Yeah.
It's about time. King David did it. I mean, now it's time for the rest of the world to move their embassies. I hope America is just the first out of many to, at all,
That's more of a political statement that I don't really have an opinion about.
I'm very happy. I think it's been the capital of Jerusalem for as long as we've been here.
Right.
So I think it's about time that everyone starts to realize that and recognize it.
And I think that's something that most American Jews believe that that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel.
Right.
That said, making the move causes strife, and it's been in Tel Aviv for many years. So I think it makes sense to be in Jerusalem, but I'm not sure if it's worth the divisions that will create.
Right.
It's nice to have Jerusalem recognized as the capital, because it is the capital.
Right.
Maybe it'd be more convenient, if anything.
I have no problem with that.
I'm happy that they're doing it. I think it's
because
about
actually
time,
most of the governmental things are already in Jerusalem.
All the past presidents, when it came time for campaigning, everybody said we're going to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and no one had the courage to do it. And it's a move that should have been done many, many years ago.
I'm very proud. I'm Donald Trump. He's an amazing president. I think it's amazing that he's your president and that he loves us.
I think it's amazing too, yeah.
Finally, we have a nice president that loves Israel and support us.
The nicest gift we can get for the 70th birthday of Jerusalem.
Well, there is a way of putting it. It's a birthday present.
It is.
To commemorate Israel's 70th anniversary as a nation, CBN produced a new documentary called To Life: How Israeli Volunteers Are Changing the World. Here's a look at why some see this as Israel beginning to fulfill its biblical mandate to become a light to the nations.
Violent aftershocks rattle that region.
We know that every minute is critical if we want to find survivors.
She already had damage to the lungs.
They just come with their clothes only.
It's breaking my heart. This makes the surgery even more difficult.
There is blood on our hands if we know and we walk away.
And I think that God wants me here because He wants me to help these people.
I can help refugees, so this is what I should be doing.
I think that's not only our privilege, but our duty.
No matter which religions he have, which color he is, what language he talks.
When people need us, we come and help.
The common language is that they're human beings.
We can't just sit back and watch what's going on.
This is how changes start.
If you would like a copy of To Life yourself, please log on to cbn.com. It's a great idea for a small group, Sunday school, and for family or friends. That's all for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.